Poor guy seemed almost happy to be rid of it. Jack looked at the man framed in the window, turning away with some effort. "He probably is," Jack said as we climbed into the cab of the truck. He stood at the window as we pulled away, just silently watching us drive up the road with his wife's Toyota Corolla. When the order came in today, I expected it would be one of the bad ones. Given the circumstances, the bank had extended his payment for as long as possible, but the time had finally come to call in their debt. I've been in repossession for about 3 years now. I work for a private outfit, Larkin Brothers, out of Atlanta, Georgia. In a city that size, you see a lot of unpaid car notes, so there's always business for a man in my line of work. I've seen a lot in my 3 years. I've had people attack my vehicle, pull guns on me, and try to drive cars off my truck after I've chained them in. This repossession, though, was definitely the most shocking thing I've ever seen. David Gursley had become something of a local celebrity after the disappearance of his wife, Evelyn. David was a heart doctor whose practice was frequented by many. He was touted as a miracle worker and had performed many complicated procedures that his colleagues refused to take on. He was well respected in the community and well liked by his patients. So when his wife had disappeared, David had not been at the top of the suspect list. We pulled out of the gated community and onto the main road. As the traffic cruised, I caught myself looking at the car in the rearview mirror as Jack made his way back to the lot. It was pristine, only having a few dings from the various adventures that Mrs. Gursley had taken it on. It was a wonder the wheels were still on it, given Evelyn's track record. If David Gursley was famous, then Evelyn Gursley was infamous. Evelyn was a staple in the Atlanta social scene. She was out every weekend, carousing, drinking, calling the local hospitals looking for David. She'd been in several tabloids, the papers bemoaning that such a man as David had such an embarrassment for a wife. David was no angel, of course. Their fights had been heated, her breakdowns epic, and if I was David Gursley, I think I'd have been relieved when she went missing. Looking in the rearview mirror as Jack drove, I did a double take and almost told him to pull over. I looked at it again, though, and shook my head as I saw nothing was there. I had been sure that I could see someone in the driver's seat, a woman with long blonde hair, almost as if the ghost of Evelyn Gursley had taken it for one last spin. "You okay, kid?" Jack asked, and I nodded as I looked out the window instead. I guess everyone was hoping to see Evelyn Gursley these days. David had reported her missing a few days after she'd left in her green Corolla, but she hadn't been officially classified as a missing person until they found her car by the side of the road. That had been about a month ago, and everyone was keeping an eye out for her, though most assumed that she was out on one of her typical benders. Evelyn did these sorts of things pretty frequently, after all, and it was expected that she would show up again after her credit card stopped working. We pulled into the lot, and the gate chugged shut behind us. I got out and helped Jack unload the car. The tires bounced a little as they hit the ground, and I could have sworn that something bumped inside the trunk. It didn't sound like the usual bump of a spare tire banging around, that semi-metal thunk of the rubber circle rebounding off of something. It made me want to open it up so I could investigate, but that was a big no-no. We were paid to bring the cars to the lot, not inspect them. That was a different department, and the boss didn't like it if the jumpsuits, as they called us, went rifling through the cars in Impound. Besides, we had work to do. As we rode to the next stop, I couldn't help thinking about the car and the missing lady who had once driven around in it. Evelyn Gursley hadn't been officially missing till after her car had been found. It wasn't uncommon for Evelyn to just go off for days at a time, but she always sobered up and called her husband for money so she could get home. She'd been missing a few years ago, back when I was in high school, and I only remember it because the football team, of which I was a member, had gone out to help look for her. We had canvassed the area around their house and the nearby bar she often drank at, and the surrounding woods where her car had been found. Her husband had come with us, and I talked with him a few times as we canvassed. I liked David. He was easy to talk to, and you could tell that despite how his wife acted sometimes, he loved her too. When she called him from South Florida after a week of being missing, he had wired her money for a plane ticket, and the search was called off. So when she had been reported missing this time, no one really expected much of it. She would call soon, maybe from Jamaica or New York, and he would send her money so that she could come home again. It was easy to roll your eyes at the pair, but I always kind of felt sorry for him. David Gursley did more pro bono work than any other surgeon in the state, and he was one of the most respected heart surgeons in his field. Were it not for his wife, he would have had nothing but that glowing reputation of his, but people love to see someone fall. They always harked on the idea that he couldn't control his wife or her drinking problem. He had long ago stopped bringing her to large functions, but that hardly stopped her from showing up and making a scene. As we hooked the car to the ramp, the owner already shouting from the porch about getting his lawyer, I wondered why he hadn't just divorced her to save himself from embarrassment. I suppose maybe he didn't want her to drink up half of his money, but that was only a guess. When we got back, Lisa was waiting for us on the curb. Lisa was our receptionist, a cute little dark-haired girl of Latin persuasion. She could be fiery, she could be feisty, but the look she wore now had me believing that she was about to turn pleading. Lisa was a good worker, but she didn't like going into the impound area if she could help it. The keys she was holding in her left hand made me think she was probably about to ask Jack or me to get a car for her, and I rolled my window down and told her to toss them in. She smiled. "You're a peach. It's the red Fiesta in 55. If you could bring it up while I do the paperwork, I'll buy you lunch sometime." I caught the keys and told her it was a date as Jack and I rumbled into the impound. "You know when she says lunch, that's all she's talking about, right?" Jack asked as the gate closed behind us. "Pfft, you don't know that. Maybe this is just how it starts." "Whatever, Casanova. Go make sure everything's ready for this puppy to roll off." I climbed out and went around the back, checking the leads and ensuring everything was ready for a smooth touchdown. As I watched the car begin to lower, a loud and unpleasant process, my eyes strayed to the green Corolla we had parked earlier. It looked kind of forlorn just sitting there, that faithful engine that had taken Mrs. Gersley to so many watering holes and mostly returned her safely home again. As I looked at it, something was dripping from the back of it. It was slowly dropping onto the sand and grass of the impound lot, and the drops were thick and viscous. Looked like radiator fluid, and I wondered if maybe we had broken something when we dropped it down. Maybe some chemicals or spare engine fluid? I was drawn back to reality as Jack yelled at me to get out of the way, the ramp missing me by an inch as I jumped back. I helped guide the car back, unhooking the chains when it was level, and Jack groused at me for daydreaming as I came back to the cab for the keys. I parked it in spot 68, and as I drove past the Corolla and Lisa's Fiesta, I was glad to see that the puddle had stopped growing. I didn't think about the Corolla again until Friday. I was getting ready to go get some lunch, Lisa prepared to make good on her promise, when my boss asked me to pull the Corolla from Dr. Gersley to the inspection bay. "Dealer wants to pick it up, and we need to get it inspected so they can have it." I nodded, grabbing the keys and heading into the lot to get the car. Inspections are mostly to ensure that we haven't screwed anything up when we were repoing it. That and any damage that the owner might have forgot to catalog. As I climbed in behind the wheel, I knew something was amiss at once. It had been hot the last couple of days, an absolute scorcher, and the car smelled like there might be rotten food in it somewhere. No, not food. More like someone had hit an animal and it had gotten knocked into the undercarriage. I cranked the car and rolled the windows down, powering through the task as I tried not to lose my appetite along the way. Marge was waiting for me, a stocky middle-aged mother of 3 who ran the detailing area, and she pinched her nose as she smelled the aroma through the window. "Jesus, what an odor!" "Yeah, kinda smells like roadkill. Maybe something in the undercarriage?" "I'll get it on the hoist and have a look. Thanks for bringing it to me." I waved at her as I moved off to meet Lisa by the front, and the two of us headed off to lunch. On that score, Jack had been right, but the real surprise was what was waiting for me when I walked back alone. Lisa had paid for lunch, but she had taken hers to go so she could run some errands with her boyfriend. Eating my barbecue basket took some of the sting out of the revelation, but it made the walk back by myself twice as pathetic. I had struck out again, but at least there were under the 3 hours of work to keep my mind off of things, right? I had just stepped into the repo lot to look for Jack when someone screamed like they were being murdered. I saw Jack heading for the inspection bay on the run, and I was right behind him as another scream shivered into the afternoon sky. It was Marge, and it appeared she had found the terrible smell. It hadn't been roadkill, or even old food, but it had solved the mystery of what had befallen Evelyn Gersley. The corpse had been in the trunk, its flesh mostly liquefied by now, and the face stared out at us from 2 empty pits. The eyes were gone, the face eaten by bugs until the skull peeked out, but it was nowhere near as grisly as the wound on her chest. Someone had cut her chest open, and the place where her heart should be gleamed wetly from her putrefied flesh. The cops came quickly when we told them that we believed we had found Evelyn Gersley in the trunk of a car we had repoed. They questioned all of us, wanting to know everything we had seen since we took the car. It didn't take long for David Gersley to be taken into custody. The cops confided in me that he hadn't fought them. It was like he was just waiting for us to come find him. Over the next few days, the details came out in the news, shedding some light on why the beloved David Gersley had murdered his wife. Evelyn had caught him cheating, that much was known, but the two had seemed to reconcile. Evelyn hadn't wanted to leave. She had the best possible life, and with David's money, she could continue to drink and cavort as she chose. Then, David had met Linda Smalls, and things had changed. Linda was a pillar of the community. She organized charity events, worked to set up soup kitchens, clothing drives, raised 5 boys, and became the breadwinner for her home when her husband's stroke last year had left him partially paralyzed. She helped so many, but it seemed that no one would be there to help her when she needed it. No one besides David Gersley. David had been following her case, hoping to find a proper donor for her. She had some rare blood type, the same blood type as Evelyn, come to find out, but the two couldn't be more different. David tried his best to find her a donor, but as her time grew closer, he realized she wasn't going to find a new heart in time. Not unless he took some drastic measures. He cut out his wife's heart, using the skills he had developed over years of doing the same for patients, and donated it to Linda Small anonymously. The revelation had caused a lot of stress in Linda Small, but she's taken the opportunity to do work with the sacrifice that he made for her. I think back on that every now and again, telling the new guys about it now that it's my turn to drive the truck since Jack retired last year. From then on, the boss made it a rule to check the trunks of the cars before we left them in the lot. All vehicles are searched for anything suspicious before we sign off on them, so that nothing like this happens again. We're more careful now, but I doubt we'll ever encounter a situation that weird again. Least, I sure as hell hope not. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. If you enjoyed tonight's story, why not go ahead and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the spooky stuff we do here. If you'd like to get a copy of my latest book, there's a link below. Or if you'd like to support the show more monetarily, you can always come down to Patreon. I have many tiers. I'm sure you'll find something that interests you. If you're interested in my books, I always recommend my Ghostly Reader tier. Ghostly Readers get a copy of my book signed on their doorstep anytime I write one, which is at least twice a year. Patrons always get their spooky a little bit early so they can enjoy them before that night's premiere. And speaking of patrons, let's go ahead and thank them. Thanks to Janet and Winters for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributors, and thanks to Xaronana, Emily Coltsfoot, Martha, Marianne Schuler, Jennifer Damron, and Tyler Parker for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks, guys. We just couldn't do the show without you. I'm sure by now you can see some videos appearing at the end here. If you think you might like a little more spooky, why not go ahead and click on another one? I'm sure you can handle a little bit more. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.